All right. Well, this is the second try here. These technical difficulties are pissing me off. I so I started a video a half hour ago. The mic was working, and then it wasn't working. So for most of the video, I was silent. Um, Fucking pisses me off. So I wanted to make this video. I tried to make it earlier today. YouTube keeps crashing on my smartphone, so that's not an option until I either fix it or I give in and I give into the planned obsolescence and buy a new one, which I really don't want to do. So I'm going to attempt to repeat myself here about this subject of Álfablót and Samhain. So, okay, if I can ask you guys a favor, if I lose sound and you don't hear a damn thing, just drop me a comment, please, in the chat. But yeah, I can see my little sound bar here, so it looks like I've got sound so far. All right. So yeah, I haven't made a damn video in a while. I have had Saturn transiting over and retrograding over back and forth over my my Mercury and my birth chart for quite some time now. And it's tough to get my thoughts together because Mercury is speech and communication, thinking and all that. So it's been a bitch. You guys haven't seen me on here for a while. I'm looking at, I'm trying to like redo my websites and my channels. So I think I'm going to keep this channel for, I don't know, commentary like this, and then the astrology and rune and, overall divination. That's going to be a separate channel. And I've got like a new, same logo, but a new brand name that I like more. So anyway, this whole thing has been, kind of reforming. So I haven't been doing much on here. But yeah. So let's talk about this. Let's talk about this season and this holy day. So I was trying to get that video out on the 31st of October in my time zone, but we've just passed midnight. So it's now the 1st of November. But Álfablót and the Veternats, the winter nights, they're a season. Samhain is a season. So this holy time of the year starts on October the 31st, runs till the winter solstice around December 20th, 21st, 22nd. We usually consider it the 21st. It's a little bit of wiggle room. So this is the time of the year when, if we want to get in touch, if we want to communicate with our ancestors, not just our biological ancestors, but the founders and the elders, the past elders of our indigenous spiritual traditions, this is the time to do it. And the science behind this is because here in the Northern Hemisphere, from around October 31st, November 1st, through about December 21st, this is when the Earth's magnetic field is at its weakest in the Northern Hemisphere. Because after the fall equinox in the third week of September, from our point of view, in the Northern Hemisphere, the sun dips below the equator, so we have longer nights than days. So we are not receiving the sun's light as directly as the other half of the year, as the lighter half of the year. So because of this, because of the shorter days and the more indirect radiation and light from the sun, the magnetic field of the Earth weakens. And because of this weakened magnetic field, there's more observed paranormal activity. So the barriers and the veils between our material 3D world and the spiritual worlds that coexist all around us these barriers and these veils are much thinner. So we have a greater access to these non-physical beings, some of whom are our ancestors, biological, tribal, ethnic, and spiritual ancestors. And particularly those who ascended. So the human soul is a midpoint in an evolution, in a spiritual evolution. So the human soul is at the midpoint. At the lower end of this evolution, we have what's called dwarves in Germanic mythology. Those are the emotions. The emotions are independent living things. They're not us. We are the human soul. And then at the higher end of this evolution are the elves. So these are ascended human souls. So they have finished up their lesson plan. They've finished up their syllabus in the reincarnation cycle, the reincarnation video game. So that's what this reality is. It's a school for the soul. It's basically a role-playing video game. So those elves, those ascended souls, they level up to something that you could compare to a guardian angel. So before they merge with, the source of everything in the universe, which people have called God, they stay behind on the edge of basically the void, and they assist us. They are our spiritual teachers. They're our guardian angels, for lack of a better term. So this is the time where we get in touch with them, because again, these veils between our physical world and the non-physical worlds are at their thinnest. So in our indigenous spiritual traditions all over the world, we knew what these other spiritual non-physical worlds are. And then the Abrahamic religions came in, and in a lot of cases, Buddhism came into Asia and did their damnedest to put an end to that. Excuse me. Throat's getting dry from doing this for the second time. Shooting my mouth off. So we used to have in all of our indigenous spiritual traditions, no matter where on earth your ancestors come from, we had a very sophisticated spiritual science. We knew what happened after death. But Islam and Christianity, being multinational corporations, they didn't like that. They needed people to be ignorant because they needed them to be emotionally fragile, mentally fragile, and emotionally and spiritually dependent. So they suppressed the indigenous knowledge. Well, now we have access to it again. And so at this point in 2025, we're at a very critical juncture for humanity. And so our choices are to find our true roots or to collapse of the establishment. So the establishment is certainly collapsing. The West, the NATO countries, those countries are the empire of lies, just like the Soviet Union was the empire of lies. The roles flipped. America, the West in general, but America, in thinking that the Nazis were defeated, which they were not, they're thinking that in thinking the Nazis were defeated, there was this assumption that, well, none of that can ever happen again. Well, a new final solution got underway in 2020, which I can't really get much into, but it involved a flu from Wuhan and some experimental medications, some experimental gene therapies that were marketed as the V word, the VACCINES word. So, yeah. And then in thinking that, whoa, we defeated the Soviets. Well, that just paved the way for fucking corporate communism to take root. And communism and socialism have always been corporate, because they always need a loan. In that system, people who don't understand money are put in charge, so they'll blow it and always need a loan. All of our alternatives within the establishment and the system are traps. So it's like Catholicism versus Protestantism. That's a fucking trap. Left versus right, Democrat versus Republican, Labor versus Tory. It's a fucking trap. Liberal versus conservative. It's a fucking trap. All these things are the liberal establishment fighting itself. So left and right are liberal. Christianity's liberal. Islam's liberal. Now, what do I mean by liberal? Liberal is not left wing. It's not socialist. It has nothing to do with any of that. Liberalism became the dominating world order 200 years ago after the age of revolutions. So with the French and American revolutions and all of the revolutions that copycatted those, liberalism defeated traditionalism. And once traditionalism was defeated, liberalism had to find a way to stay relevant. And because it was so all-inclusive movements in governments and societies and empires don't last because they lose their mission statement and they lose their sense of purpose. So when you're too all-inclusive, you fracture and you collapse. So liberalism did that. So we got left versus right. All these different types of socialism versus each other. You know, it's a goddamn mess. Different types of Christianity versus each other. So with liberalism does not honor the laws of nature. They try to level the mountains, fill in the valleys, level the playing field. They try to make everyone equal to the point of being identical. So even though they talk all this shit about loving diversity and honoring diversity, they kill diversity because they try to make everyone totally identical. And they try to evangelize and proselytize the same worldview, the same opinions. And, you know, they're a thought police, whether they call themselves left or right or liberal or conservative. It's all liberalism. You know, this is when you get into the political philosophy of it. That's what liberalism is. It's about selling people messiahs, whether it's a right-wing messiah, a left-wing messiah, an atheist scientific messiah, a religious messiah. It's all messiahs. And the thing with messiahs is they absolve people. Well, they supposedly absolve people of their responsibilities. So they save you. You don't have to do the work. All you do is you watch your TV and you cheerlead your messiah, or you go to your church, or you go to your whatever group and you cheerlead your messiah, and you don't do shit. And you just wait to be saved. Well, Mother Nature doesn't work that way. You know, and a funny thing is in all forms of liberalism, they're always in opposition to nature because they're like, well, we can't have things like the law of the jungle. It's like, well, you can honor the laws of nature and still be a decent human being and still help people. You know, this stuff's not mutually exclusive. So, you know, the establishment's falling apart because it doesn't honor the laws of nature. So, Abrahamic religions, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam are combative towards nature. They don't honor nature. They treat it as evil and not spiritual. Well, you can't separate the spiritual from the natural. And these pre-Abrahamic indigenous traditions, the natural and the spiritual, are interwoven to the point of inseparability. And I very much, based on my observations, I think that view is the most accurate. So yeah, so liberalism, even when people they go off on how environmentalist they are, they don't honor liberalism. I mean, they don't honor natural law because a lot of them don't think that there are biological genders. that your sex organs and your chromosomes don't determine your gender. Thinking that there are 200 genders, that doesn't honor the laws of nature. Trying to make everybody equal to the point of being identical doesn't honor the laws of nature at all. Nobody is equal to anyone. It's like, yes, you can be equal under the law, but beyond that, nobody is equal. Everybody is different. Everybody has different abilities. Nobody's equal to anyone. But there's an excessive fixation on trying to make everybody so equal that they're identical. Well, that just can't last. And we're seeing it. We're seeing it all fall apart. So you've got conservative Christianity falling apart, in my opinion, particularly especially here in America, Protestant Christianity, because I think communists like Pol Pot, they got their year zero idea from Christianity. In the Middle Ages, the Christians, before they were the Catholics, tried to wipe out histories, folk traditions, all that kind of stuff. They almost succeeded, but they didn't. And then eventually they loosened up, and when they loosened up, the Protestants were like, we got to make this whole Christianity thing Jewish again, because Christianity it's an export version of Judaism. I have nothing against the Jewish religion or Jewish people. I've known a lot of lovely Jewish people. But my ancestors don't come from the Middle East, so I don't follow Middle Eastern religions. Because pretending that you're something you're not makes you fucking mentally ill. It's like the baby boom with all the World War II propaganda. They acted like they were heroes because people their parents' age supposedly won World War II, even though America did like 5% of the heavy lifting in the whole war. And then even like the hippies were trying to be fucking fascist killing heroes like Daddy. Well, it's like they were just spoiled rich kids, the hippies. It's like you're not a hero. And here's a little tangent. It's a funny thing. Is like, as far as I'm concerned, it's like every political party. It's like, yeah, they're kind of like a bunch of Nazis, because when you look at Nazis, their whole identity is about what they oppose. It's like they really can't tell you what they stand for. So like Republicans and Democrats, left and right, it's like they're a bunch of Nazis. They're a bunch of people who they're all about what they're against, what they're anti. They really can't tell you what they stand for. And when they start telling you what they stand for, they just stand for their fucking fear and their guilt. They just wallow in that stuff. Because they're trying to fucking unnaturally level the playing field, because they're just so fucking scared. So they're a bunch of liberalists fighting each other. So yeah, so we're seeing this like conservative, Protestant Christianity fall apart. And here in America, most Catholics are Protestants, because Vatican II back in the 1960s, just ahead of the whole hippie movement, it turned Catholicism into Protestantism, because it totally like butchered the Catholic Mass. So yeah, but like traditional Catholicism, folk Catholicism is definitely making a comeback. Now, I grew up a Catholic. I'm not into it because ultimately it's a Jewish God. And, I'm not Jewish, and like I said, nothing against Jewish people. I know a lot of cool Jewish people. I got nothing against them or the religion. But I'm not going to worship a king of the Jews because I'm not a Jew. It's just that simple. And I don't need a Messiah. I'm tending to my own spirituality and raising myself up because I want to do the work, because I want the power of doing that. So yeah, and nothing good comes from wallowing in guilt and thinking you're a piece of shit. So if your ancestor's not from the Middle East, following these Middle Eastern religions does not honor your ancestors. And you know, if you're a so-called white person, hating yourself for being white is not honoring your ancestors. Your ancestors will not protect you and teach you if you shit on them. And that's a funny thing too, is it's like I'm not a white person because I don't identify with my skin color. People who only have their skin color are rednecks, whether they're white, black, whatever the fuck. Because, skin color is not a cultural or a racial identity. It's not a racial identity. Your ethnicity is your racial identity. So it's like, yeah, I'm mixed race. I'm Germanic, mostly French, and then Celtic, Irish, a little bit of Scottish, um, some West English, So yeah, yeah, yeah. I am of the Germanic and the Celtic races. So that's what honoring your ancestors looks like, about learning things like this, about learning about the spirituality, learning about the mythology, the history. It's like I grew up in Massachusetts in a real immigrant heavy area, immigrant community. I'm a second generation on my dad's side. And it's like, in pretty much every, immigrant community, um, in America, it's like the ethnic identity gets lost really easy. Probably like one of the most ridiculous sort of immigrant communities, or one of the most ridiculous diasporas in America is like the Irish American community. Um, Most of them they don't nothing about Irish culture. And people in Ireland, it's like, they see Irish Americans as part of the extended family, but they kind of shake their heads and, palm the forehead because they're like, these people don't know anything about fucking Ireland or Irish culture, but they identify with it. And, even in, the French, the little French Canadian enclave I grew up in, it's the same goddamn thing. It's like, they know what their parents told them about French Canada, and they speak some French, but they don't know any of like the legends, the history, the folklore, the myths. It's like, to really own that identification, you got to get with it and learn some things. So that's a great way to honor your ancestors. Learn. Go out there and learn. Cut through your precognitive bias. The precognitive bias is thinking you know about something that you really know nothing about. People are like, well, I went to college, so I don't need any new information because I know already. Or it's like, well, I'm old and I know what there is to know. And it's like, yeah, precognitive bias. No capability to take in new information and make use of it. So, and our ancestors they had to be adaptable. They had to be willing to learn things. That's the law of nature, is you have to be adaptable and be willing to learn, because Mother Nature doesn't make excuses for people, doesn't give us free passes. And we found this out with the scamdemic and with the experimental medicines, with the horrible side effects from the needlecraft. And in 2028, you're going to be seeing a lot more of these needlecraft side effects. So, and I think taking those was really like a way of throwing our ancestors under the bus, because our ancestors live in our cells and our DNA. So it's like just taking that unquestioningly was basically just, throwing the laws of nature to the wind and, sort of throwing your ancestors under the bus. But I think recognizing the mistake there is enough to save people's asses. And so, I think that's very doable, I think. So In that situation, recognize your mistake, and then, you know, offer a sacrifice to your ancestors. So, offer up a bad habit or a vice or like a luxury and be like, hey, I want to give this up in honor of you. And so, and that leads me to a point, about pagan sacrifices, because Álfablót basically means like the elven sacrifice, the sacrifice to the elves. So the elves being those ascended human souls that rise to the level of guardian angels. At this Álfablót, it was a time to make sacrifices to these ancestors. So there were sacrifices of food. There were sacrifices of, again, vices, bad habits, luxuries, things that we could go without. Ultimately, there were sacrifices of comfort. So it was ritualistically making yourself uncomfortable for a specified period of time. It trains your willpower, gives you personal power, and it honors those who came before you. And there's this whole idea from all these centuries of Christian propaganda that pagans would just do human sacrifice willy-nilly. Now, I think that was true of like the Phoenicians and the Carthaginians, but in Europe, it was sacrifices of comfort, sacrifices of food, sacrifices of luxuries, of valuable things, like sacrificing weapons, prized animals. Humans that did happen with humans, but it was done to pedophiles. It was done to like war criminals, so captured prisoners of war who had done horrible things to the tribe, and they owed the society a debt. So it's like, well, we could keep them to work for us, or we could, we could send them to the next world. So, today it's called capital punishment. There's a place for that in extreme, circumstances. So, yeah, that whole the whole thing about pagan sacrifice, it's fucking propaganda, because Christians have sacrificed millions and millions of people to Jesus Christ in holy wars, witch burnings, inquisitions, you name it. The Muslims do it. They call it jihad. Human sacrifice was not ended by Christianity. That's a load of bullshit. It was taken to a whole new level. Because you can do whatever you want to non-Christians, in that Christian worldview. And it's insane. So it's like, yeah, one of the things I keep harping on, quit pretending. If your ancestor's not from the Middle East, quit pretending that you're an Israelite. Because Islam it's Arabians trying to make the case that they're the real Jews or the real Israelites. And Christianity, it's Europeans pretending they're Israelites, and Jews. So it's like, quit pretending, because it makes you fucking mentally ill, and you look like an idiot. If you don't want to be mentally ill and you want to be spiritually healthy, quit pretending. And it's like, especially, when you look at the King James Bible, it's like the Torah of Europe, or like the Torah of Britain, or like, the British Talmud. It's like I said, I respect people's choice to be Christians. I respect their faith, but I think it's like role playing. It's like LARPing. It's like pretending to be an Israelite. I don't see what good that does. So yeah, especially when you get to the time of King James, it's like they were pretending to be Israelites. So, and it's really made the West fucking insane. Everybody gets their turn. Catholics were fucking dickheads through the Middle Ages. In the Renaissance, the Catholic Church, well, I should say the Catholic Church was a bunch of dickheads. A lot of the people went along with it and participated in, the persecutions, just because it's like, well, they had Stockholm syndrome. And for so many centuries, not fitting in could mean death. So, in people's ignorance and Stockholm syndrome and moral weakness, they joined in. And as the Catholic world started softening up, the Protestant world stepped in and they took their turn to be dickheads. And Islam, they have had a long term of being dickheads. So, but they're all mentally ill because they're pretending to be the fucking true Israelites. And, you've got, well, all the religious wars over the years. You had Europeans fighting over the interpretation of Jewish scriptures from the Middle East. Like it's just stupid. And the Muslims are fighting about the interpretation of Jewish scriptures. So it's like, go find your own roots, your own tribal, spiritual, ethnic roots. And the thing about ethnic identity too is that is the antidote to racism, because the biblical Abrahamic religions started racism. You go to the book of Genesis, and Jehovah, the God of fucking genocides, tells Abraham, your descendants are going to rule the world and own the world because they're the most special. That was the beginning of racial supremacy. And all through the Bible, everybody who's someone is of the house of David, the bloodline of David, especially Jesus. Well, anybody who's of the bloodline of David is the racially pure Superman. So, when you look at Nazi Germany, that was a toxic overdose of Middle Eastern Abrahamic religion, Christian. It was a toxic overdose, a toxic reaction to Christianity and Judaism. Because those religions had absolutely nothing to do with the German people. They were imposed on them at pain of death. And during the Enlightenment, in the 1700s, and then in the early 1800s during the Romantic period, you had philosophers like von Goethe, and later ones after that. They kept pointing out, the German people have lost their spiritual and cultural soul, and if they don't get it back, things can go really wrong. And Carl Jung even said this about the Nazi movement. It was like, well, this was a group of people who lost their cultural and ethnic and spiritual identity, and they had Stockholm syndrome for a foreign religion, and they lost their minds collectively. And then, the way Germany got fucked after World War I was like what really pushed it over the edge. So, yeah, nothing, and even the ancient Greeks used to say it. They said, if you worship foreign gods and foreign religions, you are truly a slave. So, yeah, this is a critical time. Get back to your true roots, or you're going to go mentally ill. And there's that old saying, those who the gods wish to destroy, they first make mad. They first make insane. And, you're seeing people go insane right now. Like I said, you're seeing the right-wing woke, which is Christian conservatism, and then you're seeing the left-wing woke, which is the like the fucking the atheist Bolshevik, whatever. They're both going insane and ready to destroy each other. So those of us who get back to our roots, to our ethnic, indigenous, spiritual roots, we're going to do just fine. We're going to get through this. So, yeah. So I wish you all a blessed Álfablót and a blessed Samhain. That wasn't too bad. It's been tough for me to make videos lately. I don't think it was too bad anyway. I'll be seeing you guys later. Have a good one. Oh, and this is the time of the year. If you want to do some psychedelics to change your perspective, this is the time to do it between now and Yule. I think psychedelics, it's something you do once or twice in your life. You you show yourself that there is, something beyond materialism, and then you integrate what you learned and you stop doing the fucking psychedelics. And you take up a spiritual practice, and you cultivate your energy, you increase the energetic charge, electromagnetic charge of your body and your mind. And there are tools to do this on my website, cosmicalchemist.com. I sell Qigong videos that allow you to do exactly that. So, especially at this Samhain Álfablót winter nights season, the heart centered Qigong is probably the best, because it's all about invoking these ancestors, these immortals, and having them guide you. So yeah, these video, I mean, they're like $30. It's very inexpensive. It's extremely powerful, and it's literally life-changing because it gets emotional garbage out of your body and mind. So anyway, I got to go to bed. Thanks for tuning in, guys. Talk to you later.